Matthias is here, your trusted advisor. Let's talk about Copilot and Fabric. Copilot and Fabric is a multiple personality. You have multiple Copilots. So let's talk a little bit about generic stuff and then about the specific Copilots. The generic stuff is Copilot is a large language model, an AI assistant. You will most probably know that. The most famous term for that is ChatGPT, but there are others on the market. And the difference to a generic large language model is that the Copilot is trained with your specific data, or it's not exactly trained. It's more like it is feeded with your specific data. And exactly there is a difference for different Copilots because you have several areas in Fabric, and not all areas have the same data sets and the same commands and so on. That's the reason why you have different types of Copilots. The interface for interacting with Copilot is always typing. You could imagine that you could speak with Copilot, but given the fact that you most probably will use specific column names or table names and so on, the keyboard is at the moment the best interface. So you will have in any way some way of chat typing interface to interact with Copilot. However, there are different areas and different input methods where you can use Copilot, and we will go through them a little bit. Be aware that all large language models are non-deterministic, which means that they can produce different results even when you ask them the same stuff and even when the data stays the same, because they work like they do. They are based on Azure OpenAI service in the backend, so everything stays within Azure, which is great for you and it's great for responsiveness. In general, it's available across all Fabric workloads. You don't need a specific F capacity, so you can use it from F2 on upwards, and you can also define a specific Fabric capacity for the usage with Copilot when you want to bundle the Copilot usage and bring it out of the capacities consumption structure. So you want to, because it could, depending on the scenario, it could be that there's a lot of Copilot usage in a specific capacity. You have different Copilots. Let's have a look at our Fabric periodic table, because we can simply filter for Copilot. There you go. And then you see we have different Copilots. We have the Copilot in Data Warehouse. We have the Copilot in Notebooks. We have the Copilot in Data Factory. And we have the Copilot in Power BI. And we have the generic Copilot for Fabric, which is an overall experience. Depending on different Copilots, you have different supported areas, as you can imagine. So let's start with a high-level architecture. So let's go a little bit over here. When we put in the middle like the user, so let's start with the user. There you go. User starts always interacting with Copilot. So it's a user and the Fabric service. So you start with some kind of input from the user, right? This input then flows into some pre-processing, right? Like there's a pre-processing like rounding or reg, which simply means that the items that are relevant and visible for the user are fed into the chat. So basically Copilot knows, I don't know, your workflow, your reports or your data items or your tables or something like this. Then it's pasted through the Azure OpenAI service. This is called the LLM. And after that, there is post-processing, like formatting, like validation, and responsible AI, which means that you only get proper and valid content back. After that, there is an output to the user back. So this is like the complete flow. But in the pre-processing, there's more coming in to the context side, which is anything that is like context sources. Context. And context sources are something like schema, item schemas, like tables, columns, measures, and so on, like metadata, relationships, properties, and so on, data points. I like visuals or like data frames, and chat history. Chat history is your current chat session. All that is assembled also in the input. So it's taken into account when you process, when the large language model processes your chat request. And out of all that, the output is generated, and then it's fed back to the specific user interface. This is how things basically work. So you have like a common architecture. When we make it a little bit more from a user interface point of view, you have the common architecture with Azure OpenAI, with grounding, all the stuff that we just talked about, tokenization. This is that the large language model analyzes your input and generates the output. On post-processing, all that we just talked about has like different front or back ends where you can trigger that. The most famous one is usually Power BI. Power BI. There you have the reporting layer. And in the reports, you can ask data questions. You can create pages. You can summarize. You have semantic models. The semantic models, there you can generate DAX queries, you can create measure descriptions, or you can create synonyms. So this is all in Power BI. Next area would be data engineering. This is notebooks. Oh, that's not correct. Let's wipe that out. There we go. Notebook. In notebooks, you have the chat panel. So you can chat at the side of the notebook. You have the chat magic, where you can, with magic commands, that is present. You can, for example, ask the large language model to comment code or to explain your code. There's chat magics, and you have inline code completion, as you might know from Visual Studio Code, and so on. So this is a data engineering experience with notebooks. Next, you have Data Factory. In Data Factory, you can use Copilot in Dataflow Gen 2. There you can transform data, you can explain queries, and you can create columns and so on. And you can use it in pipelines. And in pipelines, you can generate activities, and you get assistance when you have errors. You have a Copilot in Data Warehouse. In Data Warehouse, you have conversational AI, where you can create natural language to SQL. So you can create SQL queries. You can have code completion, and you can let you explain, for example, SQL code. And you have also the preview connection to SQL Analytics endpoint. You have also RTI, real-time intelligence. There you can use Copilot for the KQA query set. So you can have natural language to KQL, and you have query generation, and you can auto-generate dashboards. So basically that's the whole experience, and everything flows in the same processing type, but it looks very different, and it pops like up at every corner, so to say, of Fabric. So you have many possibilities where Copilot can jump in your daily workflow. You have different ways how Copilot can help you. So you have like the standalone. This is the Power BI Copilot full screen preview, where you can interact with Power BI. So full screen. Then you have the code completion view. Where Copilot is acting like inside code, where you have fixed action and so on. You have all the description stuff. You have pop-up characteristics for the DAX query view, for example, or for the Power BI desktop, or for the Tyndall scripting. And you have the sidebar experience. You most likely know that from your Office toolings. There you have, for example, in Power BI or notebooks, data warehouse, data flow, Gen 2, the side panel where you can invoke Copilot. Right. But all Copilots gather their knowledge from different areas, as you can imagine. So let's go a little bit through the different Copilot sources. So in the Power BI context, Copilot is gathering the data from the semantic model. From the linguistic schema, from the report metadata, from visual data points, and from the chat history. This is true for all Copilots, as you can imagine. So this list helps you to get an idea where Copilot really can support you. For the notebooks context, it's pretty similar. So we can put it just below notebook. But as you can see, it's again the schema. In this case, not the semantic model schema, but the Lakehouse schema. We have the data frame context. We have file names. We have the Power BI dataset schema, and we have the output from previous cells, which is similar to the chat history because it's the output from previous cells, right? In the data warehouse context, we have similar stuff, data warehouse. Yes, it's of course the warehouse schema. We have tables, views, columns. We have, tables, views, columns, TVC. We have all the keys within it, primary and foreign keys. You have the active query tab. But we don't have data access. No data access. This is quite important, right? And for the data factory, it's more or less inline. You have the query structure, the applied steps, and the source connections and the pipeline activity. And for real-time challenges, it's also the same. So all of that, you get an idea that each and every Copilot has specific sources. But once you get an idea what the sources are, you are much better off to see, okay, Copilot can help me in this or that scenario, or it cannot help me. For example, with data warehouse data. So question is always, questions from the community, right? Which Copilot should I use for my scenario? So when you want to explore your data interactively, for example, then you should use the chat panel in Power BI or a notebook chat. When you want to generate a single query code, you should go with the pop-up window or with the inline code completion. When you need certain fixes, you should use the quick actions. And when you want to find an artifact, you should use the standalone Copilot with the Power BI service attached. Why does Copilot give me different answers for the same prompt? Well, I already said Copilot is non-deterministic, so you can expect that you will get different answers for exactly the same prompt. Does Copilot have access to my data? For Power BI with Ask Data questions, yes. For Power BI with the DAX query view, no. For notebooks, yes, if you load the data into data frames. For warehouse, no, it's only sitting on having access to schema metadata like tables, like column keys, and so on. For real-time intelligence, yes, but only to the limited sample. And for data agents, yes, because that's the whole idea of data agents. So why is Copilot consuming so much capacity? The answer is Copilot is token-based. So as longer as you chat, as more tokens you generate, and Copilot always starts with the very beginning of the chat history. So it's eating more and more tokens, basically. You have high consumption scenarios. For example, Power BI report creation, when you have a large semantic model and you have a verbose output that generates a lot of token. Notebook inline code completion, when you have continuous suggestions as you type, that eats some stuff, of course. And as I said, long chat sessions. So solutions, you can clear the chat history. You can hide unnecessary fields or tables and so on. And you can train your users for effective prompting. That helps also a lot. So last question from the community, just came one in. Why does Copilot sometimes produce inaccurate SQL or DAX queries? The answer is large language models can hallucinate. So the LLM responses are based on patterns recognition, and that can be wrong. So it could be that you experience incorrect field names, or that you experience wrong relationships or calculation errors. You should always check the output of the large language model or test it. And use it only after your brain has also got a view on that stuff. Thanks for attending. Let's start with the practical part of Copilot in Fabric. First, we start with data flow. Data flow means data flow Gen 2, and everyone that is familiar with Power BI knows that this is Power Query. So let's generate a new data flow Gen 2. We will name it properly, of course. And after that, we will import some CSVs. I have shortened these steps because you need to import each CSV one by one. And I've just cut it out to make it a bit more smooth. You can see we click on Get Data and then CSV. We select the CSV, and now I've imported sales, purchasing, products, person, human resources, and customers. And on the right side, you see the Copilot window, and I asked to add a column gross revenue. There's a product of unit price and order quantity. The result is rounded to 2 decimal places. And now Copilot is working on it. This is near real time. So, and you see we have added a column gross revenue, which the appropriate DAX formula. So this is really handy. And so I asked for the next column count discount value. That is the product of gross revenue and unit price discount. And the result is also rounded to 2 decimal places. And we get now the next column discount value. In the middle, at the query settings, you see that everything is nicely recorded in the applied steps. So I could go back a step if I want. Now I ask for the difference between the gross revenue and the discount value and round it to 2 decimal places. So now I get a new column, the net revenue. And for that, Copilot is really handy. Before you needed to write everything on your own that works depending on how familiar you are with DAX, or it doesn't work in the first time, and you need to do your own research and so on. So now you can simply type it and it will just work. That's it, really cool. And in that way, we can add a bunch of numbers, a bunch of columns to our data flow. We have to, or we can name it properly, we can rename it later, we can change the data type. So it's like also a mesh up between Copilot doing something for you and you are doing something on your own, which honestly I like a lot. So I think this is always a really nice combination between automating and doing some steps that are maybe more complicated to describe on your own. And now I need to rename the columns, the tables properly. So dim, the shipping becomes dim shipping, products become dim products, and so on. So that's like proper naming and well, you know that it makes a lot of sense. So you can identify the dimensions and the fact tables and so on. So this is done in the data flow part. And now I asked for a new query. So please create a new query and select only store key and store name. So basically we create a dimension store. Also, Copilot is capable of creating new tables, which I really appreciate. And in that way, I can do all my data wrangling and so on together with Copilot. So I'm basically no longer alone anymore. When we now have added everything, and then we can again have a look at the table schema. So we see the dim store is already connected with the sales table because I derived it from the sales table. So that's also very handy. We have different views and everything that Copilot already knows is properly connected. This is more or less same behavior that you have in other circumstances where Copilot is doing like the background work also for you, right? We then in the next step can hand over to notebooks, but before we do that, we need a date table. So I create a date key. This date key I have to create with mcode. In this case, the Copilot didn't work for me at least, so I did that. You see the date key is inserted from 2012 to 2013, but for the deriving columns out of that date key, I can use Copilot. So add new columns, day, month, and year, and you just wait a moment, and then the columns are added, day, month, and year, and in that way I can create my date table in a very simple and easy way. But as I said, creating the date key didn't work. It should work, by the way, but I then gave up at some point because Copilot, you know that it's based on large language model and they don't behave the same all the time. So I add the quarter column. You see, for that I need to give it a little bit more of details there. And after we have finished our import, we can then switch over to our notebook part, or the Copilot experience in notebooks. And as you all know, notebooks are based on Python code, and code and Copilot, well, it both starts with C, but it works very nicely together. So I import basically a new notebook. This is the table view, so we have an idea, the data is there, it's imported very nicely. So I then import my notebook, and I get a notebook with existing code. So the first challenge, as you all know, with code is, what does it really do? And in that step, Copilot can really help us because we have Copilot on the right side, and we can ask, can you explain me the code in the notebook? And you see that it cannot see the code. So you have to go inside the code and hit the / command / explain. And after that command, Copilot will explain you the code on the right side. So what is the code doing, and what's the idea of that code? So we can do it on the next cell too, and that's a very easy way to get access to code that you didn't write or you don't remember what exactly was the idea of that code. To get into that and to get some ideas, we can also let Copilot comment the code, right? So for that, we can use also the magic commands. So in this case, we will person chat, and when we run that, then the code is taken, and the explanation for that code is connected to the chat. So what it's basically doing is the person chat command is connecting this code to the chat and making it accessible and explainable in the chat. So you can chat with your code. So this is like building a pipe from the code to the chat part. And you see all the logs and you see all the explanations just below. You could also go with person code, then you can access the code from the Copilot side and you can interact with the code. Now we are on the lower side of that notebook, and we need to create some code. For that, first we want to see the data frame customer details, to get an idea what's into that. And the benefit is data frames are accessible by Copilot, so we can work with the data frames directly in Copilot. So there we see what's inside of that data frame. So you see there are different names and so on. The product category and all that stuff that you would expect. And we have a column with a lot of nulls, the total purchase year to date. So this column obviously is not so useful. So let's add a new cell with person code, make it accessible to the chat, and say, please remove the total purchase year to date column. And what's happening now is that in the chat, there will be code created that you can use to put it into a cell and run it. So this is like creating code for you. You see that here? It's a markup with a big exclamation mark attached. This is AI generated code, but in this case, it's very easy to check and it works quite well. So we drop the total purchase year to date right from the data frame. In that way, you can create code, right? We can add a new cell and say, hey, please drop or duplicate rows from the data frame. And this will also generate code. What's a bit special is that the first cell that you create, the person code cell with the magic command, still stays there. So you either have to delete that or convert it to Markdown, as I did right now. So it's no longer executed because this is no valid code, right? Now we drop the duplicates from the data frame, and we say, hey, please add a column of age to the customer details using 2012 as the current year. And we do that on the right side to demonstrate that you can interact in different ways with your code. So basically, this is AI generated code. Now on the right side, you can select that and copy that over. The result is the same, whether you use the magic command or you ask in the chat, please generate some code, right? And you can also view the prompt that was used to generate that code. So it's quite flexible and it's quite transparent. And as it's code, you all know large language models are really helpful for working with code. So this, I think, is a good idea and really a big help, especially if you are not very familiar with typing data Python every day, right? You see we have the calculation for the birth date, and it's not inside it. Next, we want to add a column whether this customer is a bike buyer or not, which either puts out 0 or 1. So this is also then added by Copilot and just works. So very simple. And of course, you need to cross-check what the Copilot was producing, because you will execute the code and it should be fine for you. So we can also check that is bike buyer, and we will get some results out of there. We have a log file giving us all the stuff that we need, right? And you see the prompt again, right? So this is all was, I think, very, very helpful and very well integrated. And now we asked, hey, please suggest some ideas how to visualize the data. And there we put in the data frame. And what's happening then is that Copilot is analyzing the data frame and checking what could be a nice way to visualize that data frame. This takes some time because it's more analysis than just creating code. It need to fiddle around a little bit with the data and it suggests some nice visualizations. But you see, you from more simple tasks like drop this column to, hey, how should I visualize that stuff and so on. You can hand over a lot of tasks. This is really like a Copilot. So of course you need to know what you want to do, but everything else then you can load off to Copilot, and Copilot will simply do it for you. We could also ask more advanced stuff like what's the correlation between yearly income and number of cars owned. For that, you will see in a second, Copilot will create code that basically creates a correlation model, right? So this is AI just generating AI, which is a bit of fun. You see there's a data frame correlation statistic created, and this takes some time, so I've cut this off. But you see from simple tasks to more advanced stuff, everything is possible. So let's go to the experience of Copilot and data warehousing. So that's fairly helpful and simple in both terms. So we now have all our data in the warehouse, right? It's loaded and it's great. We can now use Copilot to fiddle around with the data. So we could, for example, create a table dim customer with the following columns, and this is like natural language to SQL. Also, we write natural language and we will get SQL code, and then you can copy this code to the SQL window and execute that code. And you could either create new queries all the time, or you can simply mark the query and replace it when you create multiple queries with Copilot. Both ways will work, and so you have some flexibility. And when you have a look, we see that there's a new table dim customer that we have just created, so that works. And all our other tables like dim store and so on are also there. So later then we can import our data from with the data flow in the warehouse. That's basically the idea. So we are creating table by table just from the description, and you have a nice button called insert code where you can copy the code over, and after some time I've shortened that. You see there are all the tables and everything is here, and everything works really great. So now we can create a view, we can save that view, right? We can also interact with Copilot all the time, of course. But basically from the view on, we can then create our report. So this is the view, this is a monthly revenue view. It takes some time until it's loaded, and there we go. So this is all aggregated data really nicely. So let's switch over to model and report. So first, now we need to create a semantic model. That is pretty straightforward. And after we have created a semantic model, we can then create a report, which is kind of the idea of everything, right? So semantic model, very simple. Let's check all tables and give it a name, and then we can import the tables into the model. We can connect the tables in the proper way. So Power BI or Fabric Copilot is able to connect everything in the appropriate way together. And after we have done that, we can then create an automated report. And I'm always very, very, very impressed what I get out of that as a boilerplate. So these are our imported tables, and we can now connect these different dimensions with the fact tables, with person ID and dim store and so on. Arrange it in a nice way, of course, in a star schema way. You all know that how that works. This takes some time because there are background calculations running, but in the end it's very like point and click, and it's pretty straightforward. So let's do that for the remaining tables. There's no Copilot visible for that task, so this is kind of still manual. But given the fact that the columns are named the same, you could imagine that it might be also a task that is potentially at some point automated. So now we have done that, and we can, very simple, now things go fast. Auto create report. This is real time. This just takes some seconds, which is, I think, amazing. Of course, we did some work before. And after this seconds, we will get an auto-generated report that you can use as a starting point for everything that you then want to do. And well, that's the result. Congratulations. This is